Most STR investors don't even look at building to land ratio before they buy. And then they wonder why their tax benefits are underwhelming. This one number decides whether 80% of purchase price is eligible for depreciation or only 20%. Today, we are breaking down a real client deal. The exact building to land number our cost segregation partner found on this property and why it made us walk away from a deal that looked great on paper. Stick around because the number that killed this deal might surprise you. Welcome back to the STR Loophole show. I'm Arda, founder of STR Loophole. If this is your first time here, we cover short-term rental investing and tax strategies for high-income professionals. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Let's get into it. As you may know, the IRS doesn't let you depreciate land. Land doesn't break down, it doesn't age, it doesn't lose value over time. So if you buy a property that is 80% land and 20% building, you are only writing off 20% of what you paid. That's not a tax strategy. That's ignorance dressed up as investing. Here's what you actually want. 80% of the value in the building, 20% or less in the land. That's how you maximize depreciation. That's how the tax benefit actually works. Most people are doing this in reverse. They buy the property, then 6 months later, they think about cost segregation. By then, they have potentially missed opportunities to structure the purchase price allocation, negotiate different terms, or even walk away from a deal that looks good on paper, but doesn't actually move the needle on your taxes. Every property needs a proper cost segregation study done by certified cost segregation professionals before anyone can tell you what your real tax benefit is. Seeing a sexy number on social media doesn't mean you are getting that number. You have to do the analysis first, then buy, not the other way around. Today, we are talking about a real client deal, a unique property we found for one of our surging clients. How we work with the cost segregation partner to nail down the exact benefits and why we killed the deal before we ever wrote a contract because of the step-by-step process we have in place. I'm here with our cost segregation partner, Alex Bagne, to walk through it in detail. Alex, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Yeah. Let me give our audience a quick rundown on this STR property. This was a beautiful 3,000 square feet property sitting on almost an acre lot. Hard to find. Our acquisition team found it, analyzed it, and we built the investment analysis for our client. Our client liked the property, the projected income, and the other financial metrics looked good, but we still needed the cost segregation numbers. So we brought in Alex and his team to get the exact figures. Alex, let me pause now because I want you to tell everybody what happened next.
Yeah, Arda, when you said you wanted to use this particular property as a case study, I thought you were crazy, especially since the doctor ended up not doing the deal. But it makes sense. Let's have other people learn that there's some properties that make better investments. They're more attractive for the short-term rental loophole than others. On the one that you're describing, it had a very high allocation to land versus to the building. And as you mentioned, you can't depreciate land. It doesn't lose value. You can only depreciate the building. And here, it just didn't make sense for the taxpayer. The way that land versus the building allocation is determined, there's several ways that you can do that. One is by looking at the county property tax assessor's information, where they give an allocation to the land and they have an allocation to the building, and you figure out what proportion that is and you apply that to the purchase price. That's one way. Another way you can do it is to have your appraisal split out the land value from the improvements thereon. If it's like a newly constructed property, and the land purchase was separate than the building, that's the easiest way because you already know the land value to that. There are other ways that you could use by looking at comps. If you have a property and that's developed and across the street there's a similar property that's not, you could use that as a comparable and perhaps make some modifications based on square footage. But again, the issue is for this one property that we're going to be discussing today, it had a very high allocation to the land. I believe it was well over 50%. And it didn't leave that much for us to do a cost segregation on. And I'm glad that the taxpayer walked away from it based upon that. And we did that allocation and applied it to the purchase price, and we weren't very happy with it. And then we also looked at other properties that were nearby to see if the assessor's information is off, where it's overstating the land value. And we looked at comparable properties and everything was consistent. It was just the property had great value because of its location, that there was little that we could do to diminish that and allocate more to the real property. Of course, we want to make sure that if we're going to do a study that we can defend it. On rare occasion, the IRS does poke at these studies and they want to know where these numbers are coming from, and we have to be able to support that. And here we couldn't support a lower allocation to the land. And again, I'm glad the physician was understanding that this wouldn't make a good property to invest in, and he moved on to a different property.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. But every property, like has its own building to land ratio, right? And every property needs a proper cost segregation study. Let's take a minute and talk about the importance of getting a kind of study done by a certified cost segregation professional. Can you kind of explain to us what's the importance of using a kind of professional firm who can kind of perform this
study done by a professional, a certified cost segregation professional? They're going to find more value on the property. They're going to know how to look at the improvements and treat those properly. We've looked at studies done by other firms that viewed a short-term rental as like just a long-term rental property, and they misclassified how the real property should be treated, and they misclassified how the improvements should be treated. And frankly, they missed a lot of opportunities there. And then the IRS, if they do look at the property, they want to know who did the study, what information they gathered, what credentials they have, what the methodology was. And having a certified cost segregation professional, someone who truly knows what they're doing, go in there and provide all the documentation and have everything where you can trace back to the appropriate documentation, that really helps. And also, sometimes the IRS gets it wrong. We actually have a taxpayer that I'm helping them through appeals, where the IRS field agents took a position that was contrary to the tax code, and they needed some guidance to go through this and get it right, to explain it to the appeals office and have them sign off on the position. So that might be another topic for a future podcast when we complete that process. But I feel very confident that the IRS appeals officer is going to agree with the positions that we're taking, that there is a difference between a short-term rental property, which is akin to a hotel, versus just a traditional rental property. The IRS field agent didn't recognize that distinction, whereas the tax code in the case law certainly does.
Understood. So in the event of an IRS audit, your firm basically defends the cost segregation study. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I personally handle all appeal issues. I'm a CPA, I'm an attorney licensed before the U.S. Tax Court. I'm a certified cost segregation professional, and we have others on our staff as well. And I served as the president of the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals, and I've interacted with IRS engineers and agents on cost segregation issues, not just for my own firm, but other firms that didn't have the resources or the expertise that we have to come in and defend a study. And we've always had successful results, and we'll fight to continue to make sure that continues.